Live from my living room, it's Ask Danielle tonight. I hope everyone's doing well. Yes, we are in my living room. Of course, we mostly do these in my house anyway. But we're following the isolation guidelines as best as we can, trying to keep inside, keep social distancing, which means we've done a lot of work in the yard, a lot of work in the house, and a few more things to do. I encourage everyone to continue with their isolation, probably be a couple more weeks to limiting your travel out. We only go out about once a week to get food if we can help it. And then I go check on my mom, keeping nice social distance between hers as well, just in case, want to keep it safe. But one of the things that I'm asked, as a mayor candidate, is what do I think the proper response is to this outbreak? And I want to kind of give you my answers on several levels. And I want to start with, though, China's reporting of the virus and issues that came up with that. A few years ago, when they had the SARS epidemic, they realized that their communication systems were not built in a way that they could quickly identify contagious diseases and contain it before they spread. So they've invested millions and millions of dollars to creating this system. So here we are, and they're having this issue now in Wuhan province. They have this great reporting system. Nobody used it. And the reason why nobody used it is because nobody wanted to be the individual to deliver the bad news. Nobody wanted to be the politician that says, hey, we've got a problem and help. Sound familiar? I don't know if you listened to our governor today, but he says if the golf course is open, go play golf. I think things are a little bit worse than what we think it is, and if we don't take it serious, it's going to be a lot worse. Other actions that I take, because we looked at other places that have already been hit with the virus, a good model is South Korea. And one of the things the South Koreans did is if anybody, even if they couldn't get them tested, but they were exhibiting the symptoms, they went and they were isolated. Now, they weren't like we do here, go home and quarantine yourself. It was, you will report to this hotel or this dormitory, and this is where you will stay until you're out of symptoms. Or you're, over it, or whatever happens, and so that's how they vetted people. So you first show the symptoms, you went to these hotels. If your symptoms got worse, then you went from the hotels to the hospitals. And that was a way that they were able to, one, contain it, but also ensure that everybody got the medical equipment and support that they needed over time. Things went slower, and so they were better able to deal with that. So how would that relate here is that, my personal opinion, is that we should look at getting hotels, or really the Mine Academy would be the most ideal area. And if you're exhibiting symptoms, you automatically go to one of these locations. There's medicals personnel there to triage you to see whether you have it or not. You would still get tested. Then you would stay at that location, because you're going to have a bed, you're going to have a TV, you're going to have internet, all the stuff you have at home. It's just you're going to be isolated away from everybody else so that the chance of spreading it is greatly reduced. In addition, if you do get worse, that would be the direct line to get to the hospital versus, staying at home, possibly contaminating your family, possibly contaminating your neighbors. Then you have emergency personnel showing up, possibly contaminating them. So that's how South Korea did it. And I think that's one of the things that we probably need to really consider strongly here, United States, West Virginia, Raleigh County, Beckley. The biggest impact, other than people being sick and lives lost, is the economic impact, especially on our lower income workers. This is really negatively impacting a whole lot of them. Now, the government has done a few things beneficial, extending SNAP benefits and making it easier to get SNAP benefits. And then obviously the stimulus checks that they are planning to send out. However, there's other things that we could do that would probably be even more helpful than that. First of that is For mortgage and loans, if your job has been affected by the virus, you can't make your mortgage or car loan or credit card payment, whatever it happens to be, the lending institution would simply take that mortgage payment, add it on to the end, and continue the loan that way. That way they're still getting that money, but the people that are being affected are still able to live without worrying about whether they're able to pay their mortgage or not. Extending that to rent, I personally would like to see the state step up and create a fund for the landlords. And basically the way that would work is the renter goes, hey, I can't pay my rent. I've been laid off and I can no longer afford my rent. That landlord could then apply to the state for the state to pay that month's rent, and that individual will still get to stay there until they're back on their feet. That way, again, it's a win-win. The landlord is getting their money, and the tenant still has a place to live. When they go back to work, the situation goes right back to the way that it was. Utilities, very, very similar. I'm still unhappy with the fact that we have some utilities, local utilities, that have not signed up to cancel cutoffs through this period. It's not beneficial to them, because if they cut it off, it's not like somebody's going to come and make the payment. They're the ones losing the payment, whether it gets cut off or not. A better option would be that if you can't make the payments, just like the rent, you can't make the payments, the utility applies to the state, says, hey, we have this many people that can't pay because of this, and then the state would use funds to pay that. And those are just easy things that I think that we could be doing that would give a lot of people peace of mind, because right now people are very scared. And, not just scared of the virus, but scared of, am I going to have enough food to eat? Am I going to get kicked out of my housing? And all those things like that. I thought there was a question coming. That's why I was looking at my campaign manager partner, Christina. She always keeps me straight. So that's kind of where we're at. If you've noticed, Beckley has finally started putting out some information last week, coming out through the newspapers, a couple of radio stations, a little bit on Facebook. Basically the same information that we already know, though, about washing your hands, self-isolate. They did, in theory, close down the parks. If you drove by, there was all kinds of signs saying the parks were closed that were completely being ignored. No action was taken beyond putting up signs. And so information is finally getting a little bit better about getting out. The governor has finally decided to start talking to people every day and getting some of that information out. I missed today. I'm not for sure how many cases we're up to right now. Over 100, I'm sure. We'll have to go back and check those numbers, and it'll get worse. It'll get worse before it gets better. So for today's session, one of the things that we were going to focus on specifically is crime and policing. I recently published my position paper on crime and policing. It's on my website under platform. I think it's position paper 6. Encourage you to take a look at that. A couple of things that come out of that that I wanted to talk about was the crime rate in Beckley. Website.
You didn't tell them what website to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which website? My campaign website, www.daniellestuartformayor.com/ well, that'll get you to the site, and then it's /platform, and then underneath the platform are all the different position papers.
Caitlin says 162 cases as of today.
162 cases. Continues to grow. Thank you, Caitlin, for letting me know that. Last report was only one death. It was an 88-year-old woman out of a nursing home. Really doing whatever we can to protect our most vulnerable is where our most effort needs to go. But back to crime and policing, and associated with that, Beckley has a high crime rate, especially when you compared Well, when you compare the state and national average, Beckley has a high crime rate. Now, with that, because Beckley actually reports, and not every city, community in West Virginia or the nation reports. And those that do, there's no standardized reporting requirements. So, if it doesn't meet your definition of a crime, you don't report it, or you just choose not to report it. And you can see that. I have the link in that position paper specifically about an example. And the example is West Virginia has had no hate crimes ever since reporting started. Now, we all know that that is absolutely not true. But if you go to the FBI site, the link is there. It is a 0 for everybody throughout the state. And the reason is it's simply not being reported, not that it isn't occurring. So when you're looking at trying to compare statistics between Beckley and other cities, it's a little hard to truly do that simply because not everything is equal. I call it like comparing apples to iron because there's really no comparison because things are just so unequal. What we do know is that Beckley's crime rate is still relatively high. We have, I have the graph there, and I think it's something like 900 major crimes per year. That's an average of about 3 per day happening in our city. You know, obviously there's some on more days and some less on other days, but that's still quite a considerable amount. And, you know, and there's multiple reasons for that. You know, one of the reasons is our location. We are the center of southern West Virginia. Even though our population is only around 17,000, the studies come in and say that 70,000 people come through Beckley on an average day. And so that makes it much more likely, you know, that a crime is committed here. And so if you're looking at statistics, if you have 10 crimes for every 1,000 and 17,000, that's 170 crimes. But if you're doing for 70,000, it's only 1 crime for every 700. And so, again, that's another way that the statistics are kind of skewed. I already talked about reporting. The other thing, though, with it is that crime is high because of our economy. You know, people will do what they have to do to survive. And when we have a system where the only jobs available are minimum wage, part-time, no benefit jobs, and you can make more money by taking something from someone's house, people do it. I mean, it's not a good thing. It's not a right thing. It is what is happening and makes it a lot harder. So when we look at who is responsible for fighting crime, everybody wants to say it's the police. The police department needs to be the one fights the crime, but that's not really completely true. The police department responds to crime and to activities, and then they're part of the system to arrest criminals. But crime is a community problem that takes a community solution. You know, it takes a good education system. It takes good jobs. It takes people simply caring about each other. And it also takes the threat of police and arrest. You know, our police cannot, you know, fix homelessness, but they're the first people that's going to respond to that. Our police cannot get the addict clean, but the police are going to be the first person that addresses that because they're just the contact person. And so, you know, when we talk about crime and people then want to blame the police department, well, I mean, are there things the police department could do better? Absolutely. Make no mistake about it. And they'll be the first to tell you. You know, there's things that they would like to do to make things better. But when it comes to community-wide, it's a community problem that has to be addressed. And another way that we have to come together as a community in order to make this a place that we want to live. So I think, do I have some questions? Or?
Yes. Brittany has several questions.
Hi, Brittany.
How do you think the standard operation of community policing and crime will respond post-pandemic like maybe a higher crime rate?
I don't necessarily think about there's a lot in that question. I do not think that the crime rate will necessarily change because of the pandemic. Really, this is something that when people in times of trouble should be pulling together. And hopefully, that's what we should be expecting from our leaders, is making an effort to pull everybody together. And if you do that, then you don't have to worry about the crime rate increasing. You still have your other factors, as I throw my pen. You still have your other factors, but people, when they feel they're part of a community, are less likely to act in a negative way. One thing that was hit upon, though, was community policing. And when we talk about what the Beckley Police specifically need to do, community policing is the model pretty much across the nation at this point. Now, I attended the Citizens Police Academy 2 years ago. I did my ride-along and all the classes. And I know that the Beckley Police do a good job at trying to involve themselves with the community. That said, there's a reality that a lot of people in Beckley do not necessarily think the police are doing their job. And the reason is that disconnect between the police and the community. And so, as I talked about a little bit in my transition paper, that was position paper number 1, transparency paper. I'm sorry, position paper number 1 on transparency is I want the city to reopen and utilize the police substations. Now, in my the paper on transparency, it's about passing off information, but I mentioned in there that each station needs to have a police officer stationed at that station who's responsible for finding out everything in that ward, in that community, in that area, and be able to talk to people and address. That's their job, is to go and just talk to people and know what's going on, to help build up that trust and build up that relationship with the people. Right now, while there is some, you'll see the bike patrols out on the rails to trails and occasionally downtown. You certainly don't see a lot of police coming through the neighborhoods unless they're actually, either responding or just happen to be driving through as part of their patrols. And I know that Chief Christensen and the police department are working on different ways. Just like with everything else, it's a more complex problem, because one of the problems the city police have is retaining police officers. And I'll have some more ideas on that at a later time, exactly how we do that. Because right now we pay $70,000 a pop a year to train a police officer. And then if they can go somewhere else and make more money, we've trained them, and then we lose them, and now we have to come up with $70,000 again to pay for a new police officer. But I have some really great ideas on how to get ahead of that, a way that our police department and our city can really lead. And again, I'll have more on that later. The other question?
This is Brittany's other question that's kind of right along the same lines of the other 2 questions that she had asked. Do you think there will be a rise in violent crimes due to loss of essentials?
Again, I don't think so. I would say that if there's going to be a rise in violent crime, it's going to be less essentials, as more of people are putting their money into essentials and less into other things. Drugs, specifically, just drugs. But they still need their fix. They'll get their fix. The dealer will be, hey, I need my money. Well, I don't have my money, and that's when things go south. We know that with our drug problem, again, I've done a position paper on how I want to handle that, position paper number 2. But, we have an example just this week over on Hargrove Street, I guess 3 days ago, an individual shot and killed a man in his apartment and shot a woman that was also in the apartment, but last I heard, she had survived. The police did arrest him, Southern Regional Jail. So now we have one life gone, one life wasted, and hopefully the woman will be able to survive and turn herself around. But the initial indications is that it was over drugs. I think the article said that the individual that was arrested was found with gun and with drugs. And so, so when we talk about, do I see violent crime increasing? That, in that particular area, yes, not necessarily because of essentials. I do think, though, and there's already a lot of warnings out there, is especially domestic violence. A lot of people are spending more time, don't have the ability to escape to a job or somewhere else, and so they're kind of stuck with their tormentor. I do think that we will find that there is a spike in domestic violence. Hopefully, that doesn't, there's no excuse for domestic violence, period. And that is an area, it's a touchy subject with me, because it's uncalled for. And as a community, we don't do a great job with prosecuting it, or really doing anything about it. The answer that I was given, because we've asked a lot about it, is that the victims rarely ever press charges. And because the victim, or if they press charges, won't show up into court. And because of that, our prosecutors won't prosecute domestic violence cases. The problem with that is that if you don't prosecute it, then people keep doing it. And you can talk to the police force all the time. If they go to the same houses, the same people, and they separate them, they arrest the perpetrator, they do what they can to protect the victim, and 2 weeks later they're back at the same house doing the exact same thing. And there's a lot to that. I mean, a lot of abusers are the financial providers. That's how they control people in the first place. And so what do, when you have kids and you need to eat and you need a house? So that's a huge area that'll have to be addressed. And another one of the things I'm looking at specifically with that is I don't think we do enough with highlighting the perpetrators. And, and I don't know if you've seen some of these things, you've seen them on the electronic billboards, I think we do the same thing. Whether you file charges or not, because you're innocent till proven guilty, we still throw your picture up on those billboards. So everybody can see, so if we can't necessarily prosecute to get rid of this, we can shame people out of domestic violence. In addition to that, looking at, okay, how do we help people who are basically held captive by finances? How do we give them the resources? And the Women's Resource Center does a great job with that. They even have an individual that works in the Beckley Police Department. And the Beckley Police Department has an officer assigned with that person to help with these cases and to help women. Domestic violence victims. And they are busy and they do everything they can. But just like with what I said with the responding, the police are the first to respond, but it's up to the community to actually come up with the solutions. So next, is there another question?
Yes. Megan asked, you had a
Hi,
poll on your Facebook page asking if people trust the Beckley Police Department. Do you trust the Beckley Police Department?
The answer for me is yes. Absolutely. I have friends that work in the Beckley Police Department. I have no problem with calling Chief Christensen or Deputy Chief Corey to ask questions or see what's going on. But one of the things that kind of comes out of that is trust is a feeling. It's hard to find a metric. Okay, what defines trust? And we ran into this in Iraq. How do you define security? Well, security is a feeling, and it's different for everybody else. I trust the police. I have lots of reason to trust the police. Anytime that I've had any interaction with them, it's been positive. I have one police officer that lives over here, about 4 houses down. One over here that lives about 3 houses down from my mom. Another one on the street over. So having the police in our neighborhoods has really done, helps build the trust up. Again, and I've mentioned earlier, while I trust the Beckley police, there are absolutely people in this community that do not trust the police. And when I talk to them, it's almost always the same thing. Either the police have not responded when they called and needed help, or if they did, it ended up being a bad experience. And I know that the police department is working on those areas and how to address, I don't know if people realize, but the police have a review board. So if you have a complaint against an officer, you can contact Chief Christensen. Chief will send that to the review board, who then reviews all the details of the case to find out, to make sure that the police are doing what they're supposed to do. So the systems are in place. For me, it kind of goes back to the substations and getting out and meeting the community. We got to I'm comfortable because I know that I have Beckley police close to me. I can go knock on the door, talk to them without a problem. There are areas in Beckley where there is no city police living there, and so they have a little bit more distrust of people. In addition, we have quite a few officers that don't even live in Beckley. The one I did my ride around with lives in Summers County and drives in for his shift every day. And while we have to have police officers, and I certainly don't disparage him for living where he wants to live, I do believe that as much as possible the police need to live in the town that they're policing, because otherwise you end up with an us versus them scenario. And that is really where the trust starts to fall apart, because it's all of us together, not us versus them.
Okay, so next we have Caitlin. She asks, do you feel that the LGBTQ community is being targeted by several of the police officers? Without mentioning names, I know of 2 people who were pulled over twice by the same cop, and the second time was even mocked for it, although they passed the breathalyzer test and blood work.
So my short answer to that is I don't know. I do know of the case that you're referring to, and because of its nature, that's how I found out about the ethics review board, is because I called Chief Christensen about it, and he knew about it, and he has it currently with the ethics committee or commission or the review board to look at that situation. So I can't give you a straight answer on that. The reality is there's 2 sides to every story. So I look forward to hearing what the answer is, and we'll see how it goes. I will say, all I can do is say that I know I have not been targeted, and that the majority of the LGBTQ individuals I know of have not been targeted. But that doesn't mean that it isn't happening. It just means I'm not aware of it. What I do believe is that if it is happening, I have full faith in Chief Christensen and the Beckley Police Department leadership to handle it the appropriate way.
Brittany has another question, actually several. She says, so would maybe a neighborhood watch be better? And is there a way to do that during the social thing? I mean, not to sound mean, just curious. In my area, pre-pandemic, they don't show up. So now it's troublesome.
The neighborhood watch is kind of a touchy thing, and it goes back to, or it goes to insurance and liabilities. There's nothing stopping any group of citizens in a neighborhood from creating their own neighborhood watch, and the police department will work with them, but the police department won't sponsor per se the neighborhood watch. This is coming from my Citizens Police Academy 2 years ago, because of the liability issues that it places on them to ensure training and communications. Because there are bad things that can happen. What I believe, though, goes back to getting the police in the streets, door to door, talking to people, is one way to do that. Uh, you know, I live in a neighborhood where we have a neighborhood watch. Now, there's no signs up, but I tell you what, if you go down and mess with my mom's house, 5 people are calling to see what's going on, and if they don't get an answer, they call the police. And that's the way things used to be in Beckley. And again, it goes back to why I have trust. I know from recent experience. Somebody went to my mother's house, neighbor saw it, called the police came right over. We get that in my neighborhood. Every neighborhood in Beckley deserves that. Whether it's through a neighborhood watch, whether it's through the police officers getting out and meeting people, or if it's the community organizing itself to go out and support each other.
Okay. Aaron would
let me cut one more thing.
Sure.
I'm not necessarily. I want more. I don't have enough information on the neighborhood watch stuff either. That is an area that I definitely, as mayor, would explore of how do we set that up? How do we manage those risks and liabilities? I think that I owe the city of Beckley a solid answer on that. At this time, I can't give that to you because I don't have the information from the city half on that. So.
Okay, so Aaron asks, what should we do about the police response to domestic violence? There are many officers who will refuse to investigate or charge someone with domestic violence if the victim refuses, even though the law doesn't require the victim to press charges in order for it to be investigated. Should there be more consequences for mishandling those cases?
I have not heard of the police themselves mishandling the cases. Everything that I have heard has come from the prosecuting attorney's office, unwilling to prosecute domestic violence. The answer I was given specifically was that if the victim will not testify in court, there's no way the jury will convict. And so, it doesn't matter what the police statement is. It doesn't matter if there was video. It doesn't matter if there's, a hospital medical report of everything that happens. The police can do the investigation completely right. From the prosecuting attorney's office, they will not prosecute if that victim is not willing to go into court. So again, I have not heard of any cases of police specifically mishandling any domestic violence cases. Again, I know that the Women's Resource Center has a person full-time at the police station. The Beckley Police has a full-time officer, and their job is to go. So you have an initial response from the police on duty at a domestic violence situation. The next morning, the next day, that police officer and civilian go out there and talk to the victim to try to help them. And that is a great step. It's just when you get into the finances, when you get to the prosecuting attorneys and the courts, that to me is where I have seen it break down. Again, doesn't mean that it's not happening. I just am not aware of any cases specifically where police are not reporting it.
Mark would like to know, what is your definition of community policing, and name what is required for community policing to be effective, and are you familiar with the SARA model?
SARA model. No, I do not specifically am familiar with it, but I'm going to research that. So in my research for the community policing, there were several aspects for it. And this is coming from the International Chiefs of Police Association. I think it's in the position paper, exactly the sources that I researched and quoted. And so it has to do with the organization and the technology of the police. It has to do with training the officers on how to do it. And it has to do, again, with, as you keep hearing me say, community involvement. The police are the first responders, but it takes community involvement across the board to actually truly affect the crime rate. So when we talk about community policing, I do see the Beckley Police as the center element doing the coordination, the training, and the organization that is required to implement the model. And I do, without having researched the Sarah model, I'm not sure if that's kind of on the same lines as the community policing or not. I can't give you a great answer there, but I will research it, and I will do a Facebook post to get an answer, or the next time we do a live event, I'll have an answer then. Which, on another note, we're going to start doing these every week instead of every other week because of the virus and isolation and everything like that. And we'll do that. I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to send us a message, and I will try to get you a better answer on that.
Aaron says, people who live on Hargrove Street will call the police for break-ins and other crimes, but the police won't show up after a certain time since Hargrove Street is a bad area. What should be done about that?
That goes back to that trust question. Do you trust the police? And some people know, because there are areas where the police don't respond. Well, I say that. Don't respond in the way or the time that the residents feel that they need to. And Hargrove Street is a very bad area. The apartments there are not well maintained, and there's quite a bit of drug activity and other things happening on that street. I guess, to really address that, it still goes back to that community policing and getting police into the neighborhoods. So one of the things learned from Iraq was going out and meeting people, talking to them, going door to door to build up that trust. People don't. The other piece to that is, crime doesn't happen where police officers are at. Crime happens specifically where police officers are not. So if we're avoiding areas or not going into areas, of course those are going to be high crime areas, because people know that nobody's going to go in there. But if there's a police officer walking down the street once a week, talking to neighbors, seeing what's going on, that alone will tend to drive some of that out, because criminals don't like the light. They like the dark, and that's where they want to go. And so whether it's a combination of a neighborhood watch and police or what it is, really we got to have police. And so for Hargrove specifically, it's an area that I would strongly encourage the Beckley Police to target for more door-to-door things and meet those residents and see what those issues are, especially because that's what's needed to build up the trust. And as you know, like I say, the murder that happened this week was at those apartments on Hargrove, and it's not uncommon, and it's definitely something that I personally will be taking a hard look at if I am elected mayor. But whether I'm elected or not, it will be something that I talk with the other leadership in Beckley to try to address.
Aaron has a follow-up question about the review board. Is the review board for the police department from the department?
I don't have that answer. I didn't ask. One of the things, kind of going back to Mark's question on community policing, was having a civilian review board was one of the recommended things. But I can't tell you specifically who the members of that review board are. My assumption would be that there will absolutely be police officer present on that. But whether there are any civilian members, we do have a police ethics commission we have a police commission with 3 members. Their job, though, is primarily managing the civil service part as the way I understand it, is managing the civil service part of the police force. And they're the individuals that make decisions on hiring and things of that nature. But whether they're involved with the ethics review, I don't know. I will see if I can get an answer on that.
Ayla's question is, why can't the Beckley Police Department do more against crime?
Well, I think they are. Again, there's lots of problems with that. First off, I don't know if you've ever, read in the newspaper about every day they put a list of all the calls that the Beckley police responded to. Usually it's a day, so it's like 2 days ago when you get that. You would be really amazed at how many calls that they do actually respond to. And so the issue becomes, really, I guess that question is, do we have enough police to handle the stuff that we have? Because right now our police, again, it goes back to trust. I fully trust that our police force is doing what they can. I have also talked with people that are completely opposite on that opinion. And it's perspectives and it's feelings. So as mayor, one of the things I want to do is, and kind of Aaron hit on that, is I do want more civilian oversight of the police department to help connect the police department with the community, but also to allow the community a little bit of oversight over the police department. But is there more that they could do? I still think it's a community problem more than just a police problem. The police problem to me is how do the police engage the community to help them solve these problems?
The last question we have is from Cindy. Public intoxication is often a problem. Would you reestablish the PI shelter?
I don't know. That is not something, again, it's not something I have, public intoxication in and of itself. I guess when you say public intoxication, I envision drinking. However, that could involve many, many other things, considering the world that we live in. I do believe that it is in the city's best interest to keep individuals out of the Southern Regional Jail because of the costs, because of the overcrowding that they're experiencing. So they can't put people that need to go to jail in jail because people who were intoxicated. So I have not heard of the PI holding area, so that's something else that I'll have to take a look at. Initially, I'll say I like that. I like the concept, but it goes to liability as well as location and people to actually man it. Right now, we're authorized. I think Chief said we're authorized like 52 police officers, and we're around 48. If you stay up to date with the Beckley Police Department, you'll see they're always recruiting new individuals to come in, and so that kind of indicates that there's a high turnover, which I addressed earlier. They come here, get trained, and then go make more money somewhere else. It's a good deal for other places, but I don't know. I guess maybe that's a poll question we have to ask: is how prevalent is public intoxication? I'd like to know what people's opinions are on that, because it's not something I see, so I can't necessarily address it as well. What I will say is what I will do is whatever ends up being in the best interest of the residents of Beckley. And if that means taking individuals and holding on to them until they sober up enough to go home, then that is an option that we absolutely have to explore. All right, that's it for questions. I do have a couple of things before we close. So first is WJLS is doing a Meet the Candidates on their radio stations. I'm not for sure what the numbers are off the top of my head. I know they have an AM station and an FM station. But that will be starting April 13th. All the mayor candidates, all the city council candidates for Raleigh County, or I say county candidates too, Raleigh County, Fayette County, and Nicholas County will all be participating in this Meet the Candidates. It starts April 13th, but it's going to be probably spread out at least over a week. That candidates will be able to call in, so you can listen in. If you wanted to hear what all 6 mayor candidates for Beckley had to say, you can tune in on that day and hear each candidate speak and answer questions. But I will keep everybody informed once I know what the schedule is. I will post it up on the page, because I know there's a lot of interest in debating and finding out people's positions. I will say I am fully full of debate. I have several ideas on how to do that. A little bit more challenging right now with the virus, but you know, in the Army we have double arm intervals, and that's what we do, and we talk as we can. We've got a fundraiser going on for the campaign, and it is called You've Been Egged, and you can find out more on this on the website. But basically, on April 11th, the night before Easter, we, the campaign, are going to deliver Easter eggs to your house if you sign up for it. And so to say, with the virus, not infected, all of our supplies are clean and unopened. And when we do them, we will be wearing masks and gloves to make sure that nothing is spread. What we'll be giving is the old plastic eggs. Each egg will have one piece of, I think it's Hershey's candy, and there may be a few others, but basically chocolate candy. And we have 5 different levels. So if you 6 eggs would be $13. 12 eggs is $25. 25 eggs is $45. 50 eggs is $65, and 100 eggs is $100. We also have extras. You can get slime eggs, a bunny ears headband, a wooden percussion egg shaker, a stuffed rabbit of various colors, or an Easter finger puppet. And again, you know, that is something that all of these come in. The smallers come in a box, and the larger actually comes in an Easter basket with the Easter grass and everything. So if you are interested, and so what we'll do, we take the orders, we put the order together, and then that evening we will take them out to the houses and deliver them. Could be a nice way that if you're not able to get out, or you know, to have something delivered to you. Again, we're taking all safety precautions to make sure everything that we put out is safe and sterile before you get it. If you're interested in doing that, you can see it on our website. That site's www.daniellestewartformayor.com. And on the right side, you'll see a little button that says, do you want to egg somebody? Click that. That'll take you to the order forms and more information about it. Last thing that I have is absentee ballots. So great news. The state has directed for each county to send in the mail an absentee ballot application to every registered voter in the county. I'm not for sure when Raleigh County is going to do that, but it will be coming in the near future. However, you don't have to wait. On our website is the links, as well as on several Facebook pages of how to get the application from the Secretary of State's website. And so you can go ahead and do that now, and you don't have to wait for the county to send it out. I have done this. Last Monday, I mailed in my absentee ballot application. Saturday, got it in the mail. Spent the weekend researching candidates, because there are some, especially at the Supreme Court level, it's a little bit more harder to research. But did my research, and now, you know, here it is, March 31st, and I have done voting. Throw this in the mail, and it's done with. So I encourage you to do the same thing. Go ahead and get your request your ballot. gives you time to take a look at who you want to vote for, and again, make sure that your voice is heard. That's really the most important part. One of the big shames of this virus is the fact that it has the potential to really silence a whole lot of people just because they can't get out to vote. So then I said that was the last thing, but one last thing, and that is just remember, check in on each other, especially your disabled, elderly individuals that need help. Check in on them, do what you can. Take care of each other and take care of yourself. This is Danielle Stewart, your candidate for mayor of Beckley. Thank you.